holding on 24b2. Amar Rabavu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So we just spent the last 3 dafim going over, and at the end of the day, we got to the point where chametz b'Pesach and the shara niskol and the ox that's stoned. We said that when they're forbidden to eat, we've also found that they're forbidden to have benefit. What we have not gone into, what does the word eating with regard to forbidden mean? What does it mean, benefit, with regard to forbidden? And this is what the Gemara is now going to tackle. It's going to drill down a little bit into more of the technical issues regarding what eating is and when is it considered forbidden. Eating is not simply eating. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabavu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol Isurim Sheb'Torah, all items that are also in the Torah, that are prohibited in the Torah from eating, Einoi Loikin Aleim, nonetheless, they do not receive lashes, they do not receive malchus for having been over on the prohibition by eating, Elo Ein Loikin Aleim Elo Derech Achilosan, only if it's in the normal manner of eating. So straight to Gemara, what does that mean? The miyute mai. What are you looking to exclude when you say the normal manner of eating? Amar Rav Shimi bar Ashi lemeute sheim oichel chelev chai shepoter. If somebody goes ahead and eats the fats, which, to remind everybody, in a kosher domestic animal, the fats are usher to eat. In a kosher wild animal like a deer, the fats are mutter to eat. But in the case of a domestic animal, it's also to eat the fats. But if you eat the fats raw, chai means life, which means raw life, meaning it's not cooked. Okay? Chelev chai, if you eat it raw, you potter. You potter from getting malchus. Because at the end of the day, normally meats and even the fats are eaten cooked. You eat it raw, you're eating it not in its normal way of being eaten. In the lashon of the Torah, in the lashon of the Gemara, derech achilosan, in the normal way of its eating. It's not normal. That lets you off the hook with regard to getting malchus, getting lashes. Ikadiyamri, there's another way of learning this. Amar Rabavu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Kol isum sheb'Torah ein loikin aleim ela derech hanoason. You do not get malchus, lashes, unless you benefit, not just eating now. If you benefit in its normal way of benefit, if you use it in an abnormal way to get benefit out of it, you don't get malchus. And again, I make the point that this is coming out of Rabavu, who's the one that says everywhere that the Torah says you shall not eat, it automatically means you shall not have benefit. That's why that's the Ikadiyami, to say there are 2 sides to Rabavu, both the eating side and the benefit side. Unless, of course, the Torah goes out of its way to tell us directly, either through Nevela or by Terefa, which we'll see again in a couple of minutes. So now it says the Gemara, L'mu'ute mai, in what are you trying to exclude when you say derech hanoasan, in the normal way of having benefit? Amar Rav Shimi bar Ashi, L'mu'ute, she'im eniach chelev shel shora niska agabe makosoi shuhu pata, that if one were to place the chelev, the fats of an ox that is to be stoned, the shora niska, which we know, it's such a shor that killed somebody, is stoned, and it's also to eat and it's also to have benefit, as we learned yesterday. If you use it for medicine purposes, you place the fat on top of an injury, you're not liable for lashes for this, because that's not the normal way, even if it is used for medicine reasons. But since that's not its normal use, you're off the hook with regard to getting malchus. The kol shekain, and therefore, of course, oichel chelev chai shu poter. And it goes without saying that if you eat it raw, of course you don't get malchus, because nobody eats it raw. With regard to medicine, people do go ahead and they take the fats and they put it on medicine, on the arm. But since that's not the normal use, you don't get malchus. Certainly in the case of eating, when unless you're chaya raw, you're a wild animal, you're not eating it raw. So you're not eating it raw, therefore it's what is called yupata from malchus. Itmanami, we learned it by them. Amar Rav Acha bar Ayo, Avyo, Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav Yochanan, Nia Chelev Shel Shora Niskal Agabe Makosa. If somebody puts the fats of the stoned ox, the Shora Niskal, on top of an injury, Lefi, what potter? He's potter. Lefi Shekali Sunim Shevetayr, because all prohibited items in the Torah that I mentioned in the Torah, and Loikin Aleim Elo Derech HaNosan, you only get malchus, you only get lashes on it if you benefit it in its normal manner. Amar Rab Zera, Afanan Nami Tanino, we also learned this, that an abnormal use, a benefit, lets you off the hook with regard to lashes. We're on now 24b3. Okay, we're once again about to discuss Arla. What is Arla? Arla again is when I plant a tree, and I'm allowed to plant a tree, right? But the first 3 years growths, the first 3 years blossoms, okay? Those are not allowed to be eaten. And the fourth year is called Neta Ravai, has to be brought up to Yerushalayim like the Maisa Sheni. Okay? So that's regarding the fruits. However, what about the juices? Okay, the sap that comes out of those fruits. So says this Mishnah in Terumas, Ein Seifkin Eswa Aboim, we do not give somebody malchus, mishum arlo, for drinking any of the arlo juices, ela ala yoitzim and azeisim min anovim bilvad, only juices that come out of oil juice, out of olive oil juice, or out of grapes, which of course would be grape juice. And obviously the reason for that is because that's normal. What they call grapes are grown not just to be eaten, but to be squeezed and for their juice to be used. And in those days especially, they also happen to have drank olive oil. The ilum mitusim te'enim v'rimoinim loy. But regarding berries, figs, and pomegranates, one does not receive malchus. Today we have pomegranate juice, but as you all know, when we were all growing up, we're all old enough to remember that there was no such thing as pomegranate juice. It's only been around the last 10 years in the kosher market. So the reality is that in the normal scheme of things, when you bought a pomegranate, it was to eat the seeds, not to eat its juices. My tama, what's the reason? La mishum deloy ochelei derech hachnasa. Because drinking from these fruit juices, it's not its normal way of deriving benefit from them. Because the normal way is to eat the fruit, not to have hana from their juices, except in the case of olive oil and wine, which is obviously the outlier. Amalei Abaya, no, actually not. There's a better way of learning this. If you want to tell us, the Mishnah is teaching us about the fruits themselves. That where you do not eat the fruits in the normal way of eating. So for an example, if you puree the foods, okay, if let's say it's a person who's unfortunately not well and can't eat solid foods, and you have to puree the foods, as we all know, pureed foods, when you do it that way in the blender and all that, are not exactly the most edible, but they are edible. By definition, that is not its normal way of being eaten. You would not get malchus in such a case. Elahacha over here, with regard to juices, mishum dezeisa ba'almahu, all they are normal secretions that come out of the fruit. In other words, when you think about berries, figs, and pomegranates, you don't think about their fruits, their juices. Their juices are not important. That's not what they're there for. So therefore, there's no problem to them, except of course for the anovim and the zaysim, the olive oil and grape juice, which of course are part and parcel of the fruit itself, so they're considered as part of the fruit. Amar Abaya, while we're dealing with the Rabbavu, okay, which what did Rabbavu just say? That if it's not b'derech achiloson or not b'derech ha'anoson, you don't get malchus. Okay? Now, of course, as is always the case, there are exceptions to the rule. Amar Abaya, hakol moedim, b'klei hakerem, regarding the kalayim of the vineyard. What are we talking about? There is an halacha min haTorah that when it comes to grapevines, when it comes to vineyards, you're not allowed to plant grains within the vineyard or even close to the vineyard. And in many places in Shas, not here, they go through the whole geometry, the whole math of exactly how it's, where you're allowed to plant, where you're not allowed to plant when it comes to vineyards. Now, and it's called kilayim, no different than shatnez, where you're not allowed to have linen and wool, or kilayim, you're not allowed to plow with two different types of animals. The Torah likes diversity, and it doesn't like multiculturalism. It likes individuals. It doesn't like when things are brought together in this way. Okay? So now, that's a much larger conversation because it goes into a fundamental of Klal Yisrael. That's why there is one Am Yisrael, there's one nation of Yisrael, but there are 10, 12 tribes. So on the one hand, there's one nation. On the other hand, there are 12 individual tribes, each with their individual order, marching orders from Yaakov Avinu of what they're going to be, and from Moshe Rabbeinu at the end in the brachas that is given. And as you know, the Torah went out of its way to say it's not fond of the idea of people marrying in between Shavatim, in between the tribes. They wanted people to stay within their tribes, to be unique. Within one Klal Yisrael, there are many ways to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. With one Torah, the Chol Derechecha Dei, with all my ways, all his ways you should know him. So anyways, back again. Amar Abaya, Hakol Moedim B'Klei HaKerem. Everybody agrees with regard to climb of the vineyard. Shaloikin Aleim Afidu Shaloi Kederech HaNosan. That you do get malchus, even if you have benefit not in its normal way. My tama mishum deloik sidbahu achilo. And when it comes to klei acherem, the word that the pasuk uses is pen tikdash hamalaya, lest the growth becomes forbidden. It doesn't say anywhere about takes a negative prohibition. Tikdash essentially means should be holy amalea. The growth becomes holy and not forbidden. So here there is an outlier. It doesn't actually say the word you shall not eat. It says be careful that it should not think. Just give me 1 second. Let me just, the nurse just came in. Just hang on 1 second. I'll be right there. Hi, Cynthia. How are you?
Jeffrey, 2 o'clock? You're on mute.
Yes, 2 o'clock is good.
So I'll meet you at the driving range?
Yeah, I'm gonna hit a few before we go out.
No, sure, I'll do it too. We'll meet
Loosen
there.
my
And
bones
we'll...
up.
All right.
Again, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm back. Thank you for not leaving. Here we go. So here we are, a case, because it does not say here it's an outlier that even if you eat from the klei acherem or you benefit from the klei acherem, shaloi kedarkon, in its not unusual way, because here it's unusual that in fact the issa, the prohibition, is not tied to the words you shall not eat. It's tied to the words tikdash. Okay, pentikdash hamaleya. And we're going to see this other difference coming up. So now the Gemara asks right off the bat, Meisvei, is that a fact? That by klei acherem, that what do you call it? That shaloi kedarkon hanosan, not in its normal way of having benefit, it's you still get malchus. Isi ben Yehuda Omer. Isi ben Yehuda says, Minayin lebasa b'cholav shuhu aser. How do I know that meat that was cooked in milk, basa v'cholav, basa, meat, cholav, and milk is prohibited for consumption? Because here's the funny thing. So you're all going to tell me, what do you mean? We all know you're not allowed to eat meat and milk together, right? Milchiks and fleishiks. Except how do we actually know that? The Torah Kedosha says the following words 3 different times. Lo sevashel gidi b'chalev imay. You shall not cook. Lo sevashel gidi. You shall not cook the goat b'chalev imay in its mother's milk. Nowhere does it actually say you shalln't eat it together. It only clearly says you shouldn't cook them together, which is remarkable that the Torah is asering, is prohibiting simply the cooking together of them in a pot together, even if you don't eat. That means even if you just cooked it together and that's it and it never got eaten, you're already over on a lav. You're already, what he called, over on a prohibition of cooking them together. So the Torah, now they're asking over here, good, you're not allowed to cook them together, which is such an outlier, okay? It's unbelievable. If you think about it, nothing happened. Torah says, I don't care. I told you not to cook them together, okay? So no minay lebasa b'cholav shu aser. How do I know? Because the pasuk that says lo savashu gedi b'chalev imay, that you shall not cook the young goat together in the milk of its mother. Right before that, it says ki nemakan ki am kodeshata, because you are a holy people. You shall not eat the meat of the goat together with its mother's milk. That's how it says it. Ki am kodesh, because you are a holy people. V'nema lahalon, and in the parak before, it talks about terefa. If you remember what a terefa is a kosher animal that we shechted, we slaughtered correctly, and then when you opened it up, hello Jerry. When you opened it, every time Jerry comes in, it's his thing. A good chaydish, a mazel de chaydish. Thank you. A good beef and a freilich Hanukkah. So a terefa is when you slaughter the animal correctly. You slaughter the animal correctly, but then you open it up and you find, for an example, a hole in its lung, and you realize it could not have survived for 12 months. It is a terefa. So right after the Torah brings the Isser of basa v'cholav, of not cooking, not eating, cooking, not cooking the goat in its mother's milk, and it started that pasuk with the words ki am kodeshata, because you are a holy people. Nema lahalon, it says over there regarding terefa, and I'm making it underline of terefa because later on the Gemara's lashon is going to change, and it's a mistake. It really means terefa. Just remember that. V'nema lahalon the anshe kodesh tiyuli, and you shall be holy men to me. And then it says, and if the meat shall be torn in the field, you shall not eat la kelatashlichu and oisai. You shall throw it to the dogs. Malahalon also, just like over there where it talks about anshe kodesh, holy men, kodesh. Over there, you're not allowed to eat it. Terefa is also ba'achila, because the pasuk says you shall not eat. So to over here, 24b4, afkan aser. Over here, by the cooked meat with milk, it's also aser, because it also has the same kind of language, ki am kodesh. Over there it says anshe kodesh, and over here it says am kodesh. So there is a connection, and they're right next to each other in the Torah. So it's telling you one kodesh is compared to the other kodesh. One holy is connected to the other holy. Just like the holy by terefa is not allowed, you should be a holy people. You will not eat the terefa. So too by basa v'chola, by meat and milk, you should be a holy people. You shall not eat. Says the Gemara, ve'ein li ela ba'achila. Good. Okay, so this is only for eating. Bahano minayin. How do I know that it's also coming to prohibit me from having benefit from the thing? Amrit kal v'chayma. We will learn a kal v'chayma. And now by this time we're already used to it. Kal l'matzah chayma. We will find something that's lenient and it has a certain prohibition, let's say. Therefore, something that's more strict, stringent, most certainly must have this prohibition. We go like this: Uma orla, just like arla again. Which a new tree, the first 3 years, what it grows, you're not allowed to eat. Ma orla shaloi nevad ba avera, which has no avera connected to it, meaning you're allowed to grow the tree. There's nothing wrong with growing the tree. We say no, just when you grow a tree, the first 3 years after you planted the tree, those fruits are not to be eaten. And the 4th year, you have to eat the fruits in Yerushalayim, and after that, you can eat it regularly. But the actual tree, of course, you're allowed to plant. Isura bahano is still prohibited from benefit. We say you're not allowed to benefit from anything that grows. But with regard to cooking meat with the milk, which is a sin has been committed. What's the sin that's been committed? That they've been cooked together. And this is the rare case where the Torah says, you shall not cook the goat in its mother's milk, that you're not allowed to cook. That means even if you didn't eat, you're not allowed to cook them together. And if you cook them together, you're already on a lav. Isn't it not logical to say that in such, which is something that's more stringent, there's no question about it, that it is prohibited from having benefit? So on this, now we're on the daf. That daf chofei amid aleph. So on this, says the Gemara, Marla Arla. That's not, I can refute this. So Isi ben Yehuda comes along and says, wait a minute, I can refute this. Marla Arla shekain loy hoysalo shasa koisha. Regarding Oler has a stringency that it never has a moment of permissibility. The moment it's there, it's also to eat. Can you say it by meat and milk, which has a moment of when it's allowed? Very simple. Before you cook it together, the milk's the milk, the meat's the meat. They're perfectly good. Says the Gemara, no, that's not a question. Chametz with Pesach yichiach. Chametz on Pesach with yichiach. Shehoiseloi shasa koisha v'asa bahano. Because it too has a shasa koisha. The whole year you're allowed to eat chametz. It's only on Pesach that it's also to eat chametz. So it has a whole year. It has, out of 52-week year, 51 weeks of the year, you're mutter to eat it. Still, we say that it becomes asur v'hana. You're prohibited to have benefit even on Pesach, even though that it has plenty of time to be kosher. So having a shasa kosher is not a problem whatsoever. The problem with this question, the truth of the matter is, I don't understand the Gemara we just learned, because there's a basic difference. Chametz becomes automatically asur, even if you and I do nothing. As soon as Pesach arrives, it's asur. We, the people, are passive. It becomes asur. Basar v'chalav, meat and milk. Meat is meat, milk is milk. Both are permitted. It's only if I, the human being, come and cook them together that makes it an isser, that makes it prohibited. And if I never come and ever cook them together, they never become prohibited. So there's actually a stringency of chametz on Pesach, which is not there by meat and milk. Meat and milk never become prohibited unless I, the human being, put them together. Masha'en ken chametz, it automatically becomes asur. There's nothing you can do to stop it from having its time of prohibited. So there is a stringency. And it really bothers me that the Gemara never asks this question. Now, the Gemara itself is going to break away from this in about 5 seconds, and it's going to have its own question on this and blow it away. But the truth of the matter is, at this moment in time, I don't really see the comparison, and I don't have an answer to my question. But As my father says, "Mishtapnesh v'nakasha," you don't die from a question, you move on. Okay, here we go. So the Gemara deflects this as well. Umal chometz bepesach shekain oynish karis. But chometz on Pesach, if you have what he called that it had a terrible stringency, that if you eat from it, what happens? You get karis, you cut off. That you can't tell me that by basa v'cholav if I should eat meat and milk together, I don't get karis, I get malchus, I don't get karis. Says the Gemara, the kalayim over there when you grow grain together in a vineyard, she'ain onish karis, that the onish is not karis, so also bahano, and it's still also bahano. So we've come all the way around that you can see that there are a case by klei acherem, by the case of kalayim, that it is possible to make the argument that where you have benefit, when it doesn't, even when it's not its usual manner, in that case, you would get malchus. So, right, the Gemara, if that's true, that one gets, if one benefits in the klei acherem, in the vineyard, with not in its usual manner, that you would get malchus, nifrach, then Isi ben Yehuda could advance the following breakup of that kal v'chomer umal klei acherem. Now that the case of the klei acherem, which is stringent, shekain loiken aleim afilu shaloi b'derech hanasan, because it gets malchus, it gets lashes, even when you do not use it in its normal manner. Okay, so therefore that is of course a problem because that's different than everything else. So how can you compare that to basa v'cholav? And for the Gemara of Abaya, wait a minute. Tomer b'mai. So what do you want to tell me? You want to tell me that meat and milk, you could only get malchus only if you benefit from it in its normal manner, only from its normal manner? What are you talking? The whole basa v'cholav is strange, is unusual. It never says that eating it is forbidden. It says you shall not cook the goat together with its mother's milk, which is unbelievably strange because I didn't actually do anything. All I did was cook it. I never ate it. I never did anything with it, and it's already also. So basa v'cholav in its very essence is unusual. Since it's already unusual, obviously if you benefit from it in an unusual manner, of course it's also, because the whole thing is unusual. On the contrary, it's the best comparison to klei acherem, to grains grown in a vineyard. So now what does the other one do? The one who said over there, and not the case of basa v'cholav. Abaya's logic is very good. Says the Gemara, the Eid the Kamaisav law would answer like this: Kisava lahachi kagoma b'nevelo. Switch this word nevelo to terefa, because if you remember, Isi ben Yehuda before said by basa v'cholav it says ki am kodesh. By terefa, it says va'anshe kodesh tiyuli. Kodesh, just like by terefa you can't eat, so too basa v'cholav you can't eat. So switching back here, the word here should be terefa. Sava lahachi hagama bit mi terefa. Ma terefa derech hanosa. Just like we learned that by a terefa, he only gets malchus if he enjoys it in its normal manner. The only thing that he's allowed to do is throw it to the dog, but if he enjoys it in a normal manner, it's no good. So too, meat and milk, since that's the comparison, that's how I know that I'm not allowed to eat basa v'cholav, because the Torah only tells me I'm not allowed to cook it. I only know it from a comparison of kadosh from terefa. So just like by terefa, it's the regular way, so too by basa v'cholav, it's the regular way. So what's Abaya going to do with this? Who says no? Abaya lahachi loikosa ba'achila begufa. That's exactly the reason why the Torah did not write achilo, eating in the group of the meat and milk. It only talks about cooking. Loimar, to teach us that you can even give malchus even if you have benefit on it, not in its normal manner. So it's a different way. Ulif, right? But so the Gemara, now we're on 25a2. Velifra, let Isi ben Yehuda go further with the argument like we did before. Malach Klea Kerem Shein Kain Loy Hoyo Loy Shasa Kaisha. What about the case of Klea Kerem, which is more stricter, which is the reason why I tell you, even if it get benefit not in its usual manner, Shaloi Kedarkon, it's still, you still get malchus because it never has a moment of permissibility. Masha and meat and milk, of course, have moments of permissibility before they're brought together in one pot. They're perfectly permissible. The original plants that create kalayim in the vineyard, when you originally planted for the first time, the grains within the vineyard are permitted. Because they too have a moment of permissibility before they take root. When you plant the grains, before their roots actually grab hold, let's say it takes 3 hours before the roots grab hold, you're still allowed to have benefit from those grains. You don't yet have the problem that they were planted together with the vineyard. So they too, so therefore, Klei Kerem has its moment of permissibility. Basa v'cholav has its moment of permissibility, says Abaya, right? Therefore, just like by Klei Kerem, if you benefit from it in an unusual manner, you still get malchus, so too by Basa v'cholav. So now, Masara Mishashia, is that a fact that it has a moment of permissibility? Hamabe otzus nokuv bekerem. An otzus nokuv is a flower pot that is perforated, that has a hole on the bottom. As you know, many flower pots come with a hole on the bottom so that they could be yoinik from the ground. They can get nutrients from the ground. In yeshiva, we used to say otzus nokuv. We would call it the crack pot. If you wanted to call somebody a crackpot, you'd call them an otzus nokuv, a crackpot. Hamabe otzus bekerem. If one transports a crackpot, a perforated pot containing a blooming plant, okay, through a vineyard, im hoisif mosayim osir, if it grows, if the growth of the plant grows 200 times, 200 to 1, just to remind everybody, nullification, bittul, in regular chulin food is 60 to 1. Teruma is 100 to 1. Arla and Kalayim are 200 to 1. So that's just an aside. But the point here is this. Im haisiv masayim osir, if it increases at 200 part during its travels through the vineyard, it's osir, says the Gemara. Haisiv in, if it increases, the new growth is osir. Loi haisiv, loi. If it doesn't increase, it's not osir. So you see that a pre-existing plant does not become forbidden within the vineyard, even though there's growth. Amarava, no. Trey kroy ksiva. There are two psukim when it comes to kalayim, to grains grown in the vineyard. Ksiv hazera, in one it says the seed, which seems to say that the original pre-existing seed that's been planted becomes forbidden. The ksiv, another pasuk says, Hamalea, the growth, that only the growths are forbidden, but not the original plant. Ha-ketzad, this is what we're talking about. Zerua meikara, if a plant was planted in the vineyard right from the beginning, right, bahashrosha, it becomes forbidden within hours, the moment it takes root, even if there is no growth yet, even if nothing has increased in the plant. The moment it's planted, the moment it's originally planted from the seed and the seed takes root, it is asabahano. That's it. Zerua uva, but what happens if you went to a nursery? it was growing in a nursery, and you buy it from a nursery, and now you bring it to your garden, hoisif, then whatever it increases 200 to 1, that becomes aser. Loy hoisif loy, but if it does not increase 200 to 1, it does not become aser. Therefore, the plant that was already rooted in the pot prior to it coming to the vineyard, only the additional growth becomes aser, only the hoisif. But if in the earlier case where it was originally planted in the clay cherem, it becomes aser right away. When I say right away, it has its moment of permissibility when you planted it. But within hours, the moment it roots, that's enough, that becomes the is. Now, the Gemara says, while we're on the subject, let's go touch on something else. Amar Reb Yaakov, Amar Reb Yochanan, Bakol Misrapin. A person is allowed to be healed with any substance, even one who usually it's also ba'ano, even though usually it's forbidden to have benefit. Chutz, except me'atse ashera, except the words of an ashera, an ashram, exactly the Indian word that's used today, an ashram, because of that wood has been used as an idol, and idol worship, things that are used for idol worship are aser. So the Gemara says, hey Chidami, what do you mean? You're just saying that the wood of an Asherah is aser? Hey Chidami. If we're dealing with a sakonis nefashis, a life-threatening danger of a sick person, then you should be allowed to use even the wood of an Asherah, of an ashram, like a sakana. And if it's not a life-threatening danger, we're on 25A3. Then one is not allowed to heal with anything that is awesome and atayr to have benefit from. So what's going on? La'olam, says the Gemara, the Ika Sakana. There is a life-threatening danger. Ba'afilu hachi, and even in such a case, Atse Asherah loy, you're not allowed to use the wood from Avodah Zarah. The Tanya, it says in the pasuk, V'ahavta Hashem elikecha, and you shall love Hashem your God, b'chol levavecha, with all your heart, b'chol nafshecha, with all your soul, b'chol miyadecha, with all your resources, your money and anything else. We say it every day. And now we're going to give, in other words, one must sacrifice everything for the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, and this is the famous Yesod. How do you show love to Hashem? By your actions. Your actions go ahead and show your love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Im nemar b'chol nafshecha. Well, now, if it says, with all your soul, then what do I have to say with all your resources? Obviously, with all your soul, that's everything, that's who you are. With all your resources, with all your soul. All your resources encompasses your soul. If there's a person who his life is worth more to him than his money, his greatest sacrifice is giving up his life, with all your soul. If you have to, you sacrifice your life to him. But there are people whose money are worth more to them than their lives. They would sacrifice anything to hold on to their money, right? Then with all your resources, even if you have to give up all your money for the love of Hashem, you have to do it. So you see, we are talking about idolatry, and for the love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even if the person is in a life-threatening sickness and the wood of the ashram would help, no, we can't use it. You have to, you will love Hashem with all your soul. And this now, just to remind everybody, this is the great story of our great Rabbi Akiva, who waited all his life and said, I waited all my life, at the time when the Romans were coming to to kill him, and they were raking off his skin at the age of 120, and he laughed. And his Talmidim said, Rebbe, why are you laughing? He said, because all my life, I wondered if I would ever get the opportunity to be Mekayim the mitzvah, to keep the mitzvah of love Hashem with all my soul. Now that I can, I shouldn't laugh, but to show the other side much more closer to home. There was a great man of the early 20th century known as the great Rabbi Chanan Wasserman. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, he was a Talmud by Anatoly Chopin tells, he was a Talmud of the great Volozhin Yeshiva by the Netziv and the Beis Halevi. He was a classmate of the great Rav Aaron Kotler, Zechen Levrach, the founder of Lakewood. He knew Rav Chaim Brisker. He was a great man, and his svarim to this day are used in yeshivas. He was a remarkable human being. And this is what made him more remarkable. That in 1939, he was here in America, in Chicago, collecting money for his yeshiva when, of course, the war broke out. And they told him over there, Rebbe Chanan, stay in America, don't go back. And he said, my sheep are still in Europe. Should the shepherd not come and tend to them? And he went back. And on July 6th, 1941, early on, in the city of Kaunas in Lithuania, in the seventh fort, in the seventh fort of that city, this was the first concentration camp on occupied lands of the Nazis. And Rabbi Chanan Wasserman was taken out to either be gassed or to be shot on, we know exactly the date, July 6th, 1941. He was Moisen Nafshila Adonai Adonai. As you know, he said, this is the words that supposedly he said, how those they came to us, I don't know, but I've known about it all my life. And he said to the people as they were being led out, he said, you know, we can go now like sheep to be slaughtered, or no, we can go as Jews, as Abdei Hashem, as the servants of God, and be Moise Nafshei L'Adonai Adonai, to be, when we say Mesiras Nefesh means we hand over our soul. We make it an avodah, not that Hashem is taking our lives, but in fact that Moise Nafshei L'Adonai, we are giving over our souls to our Master in heaven. And that, of course, is the Jewish way. At the end of the day, and that is the Jewish way. We look at it, we take it, and we say, our history is replete with this. But the question is, those out, when they come to take our lives, we have no choices in that. How we give up our lives, that's in our hands. And that's what it's talking about over here. So says the Gemara Vaita, Ki also Rovin Omer Rav Yochanan, all the way on the bottom of Chafei Amid Aleph. About kol misrapin, a person may be healed with anything chutz mi avodah zara, not except for a cure that involves idol worship, the gili arayis, which is of course illicit sexual relations with family members by and large, the shvichas damen, okay, and murder. Avodah zara, we're now on top of 25b1. We're just going to go a little bit over time if everybody's okay with that. Avodah zara hada'amr. Well, idol worship, like we just explained, and murder, the Tanya we learned, there's the famous case of known as the Nar HaMarosa. Nar HaMarosa is a girl that's 12 and a half or above who gets engaged. And if you remember, that's Kedushin. That means she is fully married in the sense that she's now also to every other person in the world. And unfortunately, somebody comes along and grabs her and rapes her. So we say there are laws regarding that. And of course, she's innocent and she's not blamed in any which way, but it's more than that. Okay? So the pasuk says, Kikashe yokum ish are'eu v'ritzachai nefesh kein hadavar hazeh. For like a man who rises up against this fellow and murders him, so is this thing, the rape of a betrothed Nara, a Nara Marosa. Now, what's the comparison between a murderer, and a Nara Marosa? We're coming to learn something from the murderer to the Nara Marosa, but in fact, the other way happens too. It's also found that we learned something from the Nara Marosa to the murderer. The pasuk compares the murderer to the Nara Marosa, the engaged Nara. Ma Nara Marosa nitna latzila benafshay, just as the case of the Nara Marosa, the betrothed Nara, the engaged Nara, is allowed to be saved from the rape, even if it means you have to kill. You're allowed to kill the would-be rapist. So too, the case of the would-be murderer, in order to save the victim, you're allowed to kill the murderer. I want to point out something over here. If you read this clearly, it is very clear, contrary to what way most people learn things, that the Torah Kedosha clearly was appalled by the idea of rape and said, in fact, of course you can kill the would-be rapist, and from there you learn that you're allowed to kill the would-be murderer. In other words, we're saying that the would-be rapist is in essence worse than the would-be murderer. That's how far it goes. And we learn something from Nara Merosa to the murderer. Just as somebody who's told to commit murder is not allowed to commit, in other words, if Amarit said, just as somebody is told, if you kill this guy or you're going to get killed, he has to let himself be killed, but not murder somebody else. Af Nara Hamarosa, so too in the case of the Nara Marosa, Tehoreg Va'al Tava. She shall allow herself to be killed and not transgress the prohibition. Immediately turn to Tosfos, right away on top. Pirish, Tosfos says, no, the way you have to learn this Gemara is Haboyel. When it says that he has to allow themselves to be killed, we're talking about the person. If a person is coerced and says, you have to, somebody points a gun at him and says, you have to go rape that girl or I'm going to kill you. You have to allow yourself to be killed rather than go ahead and rape the girl. Perish haboyel, avohi, but the girl, sibal, the one who's being violated, loy taharig, of course, she does not have to allow herself to be killed. The karka oilamhu, because she is considered like the ground of the world. What's going on over here? So here in this lies an unbelievable understanding. Obviously, we're talking about against her will. If it's against her will, okay, she does not have to allow herself to be killed. Obviously, she should resist. She must resist. She must scream and all that, but she does not allow this kill. But if a guy is being told, you have to go ahead and rape this girl, otherwise you're going to get killed, you should be killed. The reason for this, we're saying, is because the girl herself is nothing more than karka oilam. What are we saying over here? This explains why the mitzvah of having children, even though the women carry them for 9 months, the mitzvah is on us men. Because we do the action, they are mekabel, they receive. So in many ways, we are the ones that do the action, if you think about it, obviously, and they receive. The one who does the action is the one who has the mitzvah. The one who's passive, as it were, does not have the mitzvah. You know where this comes into play? By homosexuality. The actual mitzvah is, as we'll find, is between mishkav zocha, between two men. Two men have the isser min ha-Torah of homosexuality. Two women, while the Gemara says it is disgusting and despicable, in and of itself is not really an isser d'oraisa, because in essence, they're not doing any action for the same reason that we are the ones who have the mitzvah of having children. And that is the reason why over here, by Nara Marosa, we would have to allow ourselves to be killed. The woman that it's happening to does not have to allow herself to be killed. Okay? It's an interesting, what do you call it, the kind of, because of this, that's why I wanted to show you this thesis. Let's go a little further. If you guys are okay, let's go just for another 5 minutes. And how do I know, in fact, with regard to murder, that you have to allow yourself to be killed, but don't kill somebody else? Svarahu. It's based on logic. Because there was a person who came to Rava and said to him, More Duri Amali, the governor of our town, said to me, Zil Katli Leplane, go kill this person. The law, and if you do not kill him, I'm going to kill you. What shall I do? Amalei. So Rava told him, Lekitlucha. You have to let him kill you, and you do not kill anybody. Who said your blood is redder than the other guy? Perhaps the blood of that guy is more redder than you. In other words, klape shamaya, in heaven, who's to say who's a more important person? This is a famous line. Every Jew, by definition, in the eyes of God, is important. How do you know, Min HaShemayim, that your blood is bluer than the other guy, right? Therefore, you have to let yourself be killed and not to be killed. Now the Gemara says first, Mar Barabashi Ashkechei Ravina, Mar Barabashi encountered Ravina, the Shafale, Levarte, the Guharte, the Orla. He was rubbing his daughter for medicine purposes with the oil from unripe olives that were Orla. Now, if you remember that when it came to Orla, the juices of the olives and the juices of the grapes were also usher. So in that case, Amalei, so Mabarabashi said to him, to Ravina, Emo Dama Rabbana B'Shasa Sakana. The Rabbanan said that maybe during the time of a sakana where it's life-threatening, you're allowed to use it. Shalai B'Shasa Sakana Miyama. Did they say when it's not life-threatening that you're allowed to have benefit from Arlo? Amalei, Hi Ishtazo did Samir Nami B'Shasa Sakana Dami. Ravina said, this fever, this burning fever that my daughter is suffering is also a life-threatening danger. And in fact, that is exactly what we hold, that a temperature of 102, 103 is already life-threatening, and that you're allowed to do anything that you have to, that you need to do to save the person. You should know that. Okay? Ikedi Amri, they said, in fact, Ravina's daughter was not having a life-threatening illness. Amalei, but Ravina said to him, Midi derech hanoka avdina. Am I acting in its normal manner of benefit? No, because the normal manner of benefit is to take oil from fully ripe olives. This is not a fully ripe olive, so it's not a problem. Okay, now you know what? We're going to stop right over here by Itma Hano Habo Loy Lo'odun Bal Karcha, because that's already essentially it's saying what happens if a benefit comes to you against your will. A person is passing a church and there are beautiful smells coming out of it, and you have to pass by it, and unfortunately you smell the stuff, right? So this is what the Gemara now is going to continue, and we'll pick it up from here, God willing, tomorrow. A good Chodesh, everybody.